皆様、本日は大変お忙しい中、香港中文大学へお越しくださり誠にありがとうございます。本日司会を務めさせていただきます奈良と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。Hello, my name is Azusa Nara. I was born and raised in Kyoto, and I am on exchange to the Department of Economics at the Chinese University of Hong Kong from the Doshisha University. Here at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, I am completing the third year of my undergraduate studies. The Chinese University is truly an international campus. Numerous lectures and symposia from eminent scholars and world leaders have come to lecture at CUHK. Today's lecture by Mr. Takanori Kitamura is one of the series of lectures by famous diplomats, including diplomats from the mainland China, USA, Germany, France, Italy, Korea, Japan, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have a full house today, and the lecture is well received by members of the consulates, local, mainland, overseas, and exchange students, and teachers of the Chinese University. Now, may I invite Professor Lawrence Lau, Vice Chancellor and President of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, to give his welcoming address. Professor Lau, please.
Ambassador Kitamura, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Today, we are most honored and privileged to have with us as a distinguished speaker His Excellency Takanori Kitamura, Ambassador of Japan to Greece. Ambassador Kitamura is a good and old friend of Hong Kong, having served here as the Japanese Consul General and also a good friend of the Chinese University of Hong Kong and myself. We are most delighted to welcome him back to our campus to once again share his wisdom and wealth of experience with our faculty and students. Ambassador Kitamura will speak to us on the EU experience of integration and East Asian overtures. Ambassador Kitamura joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan in 1972. After working for a year at the Home Office of the Ministry, he was posted to China as an attaché in the Japanese Embassy. Over the years, he has worked for different divisions of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Overseas Public Relations Division, the China and Mongolia Division, the Eastern Europe Division, and the Research and Programming Division. He served as the first secretary of Japan's permanent mission to the United Nations in the mid-80s, deputy chief of protocol in the ministry in the early 90s, and minister of the Japanese embassy in China from 1998 to 2000. Before assuming the post of consul general in Hong Kong in 2004, he was managing director of the planning and evaluation department of the Japan International Cooperation Agency and a senior research fellow of the Japan Institute of International Affairs. Ambassador Kitamura took up his current appointments as ambassador to Greece in 2006. A graduate of Nagasaki University and also a holder of master's degrees from Keio University and Harvard University, Ambassador Kitamura is an outstanding diplomat with close to 40 years of experience at Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is thoroughly well-versed in the development of international relations. On behalf of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, I would like to express our utmost gratitude to the ambassador for giving us the opportunity to host his second lecture on campus. When he visited us back in January 2006, he gave a most stimulating talk on the consistency and evolution of Japanese diplomacy. This afternoon, he is going to share with us his first-hand observation of the process of integration of the European Union and enlighten us on how East Asian countries can learn from their European Union counterparts to achieve greater regional cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you can't wait to be inspired by Ambassador Kitamura's insights and wisdom. Please join me in warmly welcoming Ambassador Takanori Kitamura.
Thank you very much, Professor Lau, for the introduction and warm words and kind hospitality. And I feel very much relaxed coming back to this campus. And it's really my honor and pleasure to present the topic on EU experience of integration and East Asian overtures. Before I move on to my presentation, allow me to spend 2 or 3 minutes to tell you my short story. And being a diplomat for many years, I've been encountered with some difficult questions. One of such is, what do diplomats do? And we have some diplomats here, so you may have a right answer. But still, I do not have an answer to this. It's so difficult. Then one of my colleagues put it this way. You know, diplomats are 3 L, alphabetical L. First L is protocol. Second is alcohol. Third is cholesterol. And hearing this, and another colleague made a joke. One day, a guy was brought to the hospital by ambulance, and the doctor checked that gentleman and said to him that your brain is so seriously damaged and need to be transplanted. Then the patient asked, how much does it cost? And the doctor checked a list. Okay, we have 3 stocks today. And the first one is a lawyer, costs $10,000 US. The second is the civil engineer, 20,000. And third is a diplomat, 30,000. Then the patient asked, why a diplomat's brain so expensive? Then doctor said, answer is very clear, it's unused. Brand new. So today, I prepare my right answer to the first question, and by the next time, so this time using my still a fresh brain, I'd like to present today's topic. And I first would like touch on the European experience of constructing a peaceful and prosperous society. And with the basis of such knowledge, I'll try to see regional issues. And I believe that EU experience of the last half century presents food for thought and good reference to address the issues of our region. And let me start with one newspaper topic reported in Athens recently that I found interesting and worth mentioning here. And it reports that European Court of Justice ordered Greece to pay a fine of more than 3 million euros because it has failed to repeal a law that bans all types of slot machines across the country. The court also ruled that Greece will have to pay a further penalty of about 30,000 euros for each day that it fails to change the law. The law against electronic gambling was passed in 2002, and it aimed to stop the use of thousands of slot machines that had sprung up in arcades and cafes across the country. The Greek government feared they were having negative impact on small communities, and the law was later extended to cover all games in public areas except licensed casinos. The European Court found that the law violated certain principles of EU legislations, including the free movement of goods and services. And you may claim that the Greek law can be justified. However, it's not a point of discussion today. The point is the fact that EU interferes with its member state. EU member states have relinquished many of their sovereign rights, and members jointly share such sovereign rights within the framework of EU. Now, a state or nation, China, Japan, US, etc., is defined as an entity that commands and exercises all sovereign rights over its land and the people, so-called a sovereign state. The concept of sovereign state was born in Europe back in the middle of the 17th century. The medieval Europe had been governed by the religious authority, the Holy Roman Empire, until kings and feudal lords started wars, dividing into Catholics and Protestants, which lasted for 30 years, later called 30 Years Religious War. At the end of the war, the conference was convened in 1648 to decide a post-war Europe. In this process, the Holy Roman Empire ceased to exist as a political power, and kings and feudal lords emerged as a sovereign entity that directly and exclusively commands the land and the people, the birth of a modern sovereign state. Since then, 350 years has passed, and the world today still continues to be dominated by sovereign states. Robert Cooper, a British strategist on international relations, explains that there are three different categories of states: pre-modern, modern, and post-modern. The pre-modern is countries of chaos and of no governance, like we see in Somalia or Afghanistan. A traditional sovereign state is defined as modern. When the United Nations started in the middle of the 20th century, the number of member states was only a little over 40, while today, 60 years later, it has reached almost 200. This shows that majority of today's sovereign states were born in the last half century. A sovereign state is really an almighty, as it was for 3 centuries. Robert Cooper says that EU is the only one that has so far developed into the stage of post-modern. Let us see the history of last 350 years. The silent feature of the history is characterized by wars, the struggle of sovereign states fighting each other by forces. The fact that the first international law was the one to regulate rules on war indicates the overwhelming frequency of wars and a necessity of setting rules on fighting. Up until the end of the 18th century, the war was a game competed between kings and feudal lords and fought by employed warriors. The Industrial Revolution that started in the end of the 18th century invented tools of mass destruction and changed the nature of war. In addition, the composition of the army was transformed from employed warriors to all levels of sovereign state nationals who were mobilized by nationalism. The nature of war evolved to be a mass destruction. The First World War clearly demonstrated such brutal nature of war. Peace is an old and new subject of study and discussion. Thomas Hobbes, philosopher of the 17th century, describes our world as struggle of all against all. Or the world can be referred to jungle, where the stronger wins and the weaker loses. Every sovereign state has tried to be a winner, and war is an easy tool as well as last resort to materialize your objective. In the world of jungle, stability can only be maintained when powers are balanced. The balance of power is a practical and effective machinery to create and maintain stability and peace, but by nature is very fragile. Immanuel Kant, a philosopher of 18th century, advocates that states shall form a federation in which international rules and regulations are abided by. He believes that peace federation, as he named, restrains militant fever and prevents wars. The First World War intensified people's wish for peace, and real effort to establish peace was made for the first time. The League of Nations, the first comprehensive international organization, and later succeeded to the United Nations of today, was established by the strong initiative of Woodrow Wilson, the then US president. But US Senate disapproved US participation, and the League proved to be powerless. for international disputes. The Versailles Scheme that imposed harsh penalties against the loser of the war in Germany only provoked German nationalism and retaliation. The study on international relations started in such an environment. E.H. Carr, a founder of such study and historian, analyzes failure and claims that guiding principle of post-war arrangement, including the establishment of the League of Nations, was excessively influenced by idealism and did not correspond to the reality. The League and the Versailles Scheme existed off the road and could not cope with the reality. Let me move to European efforts right after the Second World War that European countries and US jointly exercised to rearrange European order and structure. There were many issues and difficulties, among which I think the priorities in the political and diplomatic area were, first, Germany, how to incorporate Germany in the post-war European order and to maintain stability. And second, as you can easily imagine, the Soviet Union, they had to cope with the big bear behind the Iron Curtain. On these difficult issues, European and American leaders came to recognize that the post-war European order should be created in order to guarantee a solid and long-term stability, and that for this purpose, a new mechanism which overrides sovereign states should be constructed. The initial response was the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC. This organization aimed to jointly undertake production and management of coals and steels of the member states. You may remember that France and Germany continuously fought for more than a century to occupy Alsace-Lorraine, a major production area of coals and steels. The joint project of the major industrial resources of that time was clearly motivated by political objective to reconcile conflicts and to create a new mechanism. This initiative was followed by the foundation of the European Economic Community in 1958 that put into practice the common market. In such a way, the European Community building gradually took shape and developed in a number of member states and in areas to be covered by the community. The collapse of Cold War in 1989 enabled West and East Germany to be united. But such unification was only possible under the transparent and pacifistic mechanism of the European Community. Suppose that Europe had been just composed of sovereign states, how Europe could have accommodated the United Germany, such a giant sovereign state, over which the world wars took place 2 times in the 20th century. The European Community provided the common house in which the United Germany is comfortably accommodated. The community decided in 1991 that it would start a single common currency, and that they decided that EU would adopt a common foreign and defense policy. The circulation of EU started in 2002, which demonstrates a significant level of integration in light of the fact that issuing the currency is one of the most important sovereign rights of a state. The community now named EU is still on expanding and developing process. Member states are now 27, and many others are on the waiting list. EU is planning to appoint its president and foreign minister to materialize the common foreign and defense policy. EU, in my view, exists above sovereign member states, and states have relinquished a part of their sovereign rights. EU is a mechanism through which member states share sovereign rights and jointly guarantee the stability of their common house. In this way, EU provides us with a model of the international community, which functions differently from the world where the balance of power is a major stabilizer. Now, let us look at our region, East Asia. Our region is a melting pot of old and new ingredients. The old one is that there still exist unresolved issues left over since the end of the last war, such as the separation of South and North Korea and the Taiwan issue. The concept of a sovereign state in a region is taken for granted and thriving. A typical example is seen in North Korean response. For instance, it claims that developing a nuclear weapon is a sovereign right of a state, etc. It reminds us of a jungle of struggle of all against all. The new ingredient is that our region is evolving very rapidly with fast-growing economies, especially of China and India. Such development will surely provide us with common assets for assuring people's better life in the years to come, but at the same time tells us an importance to manage the change in a proper manner. East Asia occupies half of the world population and already produces 1/4 of world GDP. If East Asian economy continues to grow at a similar speed, its GDP will soon or later exceed that of US and EU and will become much larger. Henry Kissinger wrote recently in the International Herald Tribune, I quote, "The 21st century now requires an institutional structure appropriate to its time. The nations bordering the Pacific have a stronger sense of identity than did the European communities emerging from the World War II. They must not slide into a 21st century version of classic balance of power politics," unquote. EU experience gives us many lessons on community building. It may not simply apply to East Asia. However, their efforts of a half-century serves as a good benchmark and reference. I will touch upon what has already taken place in the region and what is going to happen. I will then present related issues to be addressed to promote stability and prosperity of this region. Firstly, the regional integration is already an agenda in East Asia on which political leaders, business executives, and researchers have discussed and took specific actions. Everybody would agree that Southeastern countries have shown a good example. 5 Southeastern countries, such as Indonesia and Thailand, formed a regional organization in 1967 named ASEAN, which aims to promote region-wide cooperation, and later expanded to 10 members, which include all countries in the same region. ASEAN is not a superstate body, but it has for decades demonstrated political solidarity as a group. The ASEAN Asian financial crisis of 1997 created a significant turning point of accelerating a greater regional cooperation. Northeastern countries, namely China, South Korea, and Japan, and ASEAN countries started to act as a group. When the financial crisis broke out, IMF failed to provide an appropriate prescription and necessary financial resources, while Japan extended majority of such resources to meet the financial gap. China did not devaluate yuan and prevented other countries from a vicious circle of devaluation. Leaders of ASEAN and China, South Korea, and Japan, later called ASEAN Plus 3, held a summit meeting right after the crisis and became a core group of cooperation in the region. ASEAN Plus 3 is now a body of cooperation at various levels and has produced tangible outcome, among which worth mentioning is the financial area. In order to avoid the second financial crisis to happen, this group set up a network of swap arrangement, a facility called a Chiang Mai scheme, which provides emergency currencies to any member in trouble. The amount of the swap arrangement has been increased steadily and now amounts to $64 billion. I believe that this arrangement is the most significant achievement of the activities undertaken in the framework of ASEAN Plus 3. One another arrangement is a facility called Asian Bond Market, which intends to activate a bond market in Asia. One of the lessons we learned from the crisis of 1997 is that many countries in the region lacked in healthy financial markets, and money within the region was not utilized for the region. This arrangement aims to facilitate Asian bonds to be issued in Asian currency and to make regions' financial markets more self-reliant. In addition to the above achievement, a political movement toward creating a regional community has characterized a discussion of ASEAN Plus 3. Upon the agreement of this forum, the first summit meeting that intends to discuss a regional integration was convened in December 2005, with attendance of leaders from ASEAN Plus 3 and another 3, India, Australia, and New Zealand. The first East Asian Summit, as it's called, announced that leaders called for fostering a strategic dialogue among members, economic integration, financial stability, and energy security, and also urges to strengthen application of global standards and universally recognized values. Secondly, the integration of our region in trade is already advanced and gives a solid basis for creating an economic community. Let's look at the intra-regional trade in East Asia. The trade exchanged among East Asian countries occupies already 57.6% of all the regions and trade in 2006, while that of EU, original 15 countries of EU, the ratio amounts to 59.5%. Expanded EU 27 is 65.8. And NAFTA, the Federation or Community of US, Canada, and Mexico, the interregional trade of NAFTA amounts to 44.3%. This figure shows the trade within the East Asia has already achieved a significant level, despite the fact that East Asia has not yet formed an institutional and legal framework like EU or NAFTA. What exists now in the region is a network of the free trade agreement that China, South Korea, Japan, India, and Australia have separately concluded with ASEAN. Just recently, 16 countries of East Asian Summit have agreed to start consultation on concluding a comprehensive region-wide arrangement of trade, investment, service, and property rights, which aims to further expand intra-regional economic activities. The fast-growing East Asia has a great potential of continuous development by eliminating barriers of trade and investment. I envisage that the strengthened cooperation and integration in the economic area will build a solid basis on which a community building of this region will proceed and bear fruits. Thirdly, East Asia needs to look into political impact of the economic achievements. The size of East Asian economy, as I've just mentioned, will exceed that of EU and NAFTA sooner or later, and will further advance. Economic success will be accompanied by bigger voices and influence over the world. Paul Kennedy, an author of The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, argued 20 years earlier that tectonic power shift toward Asia and away from the West seems hard to reverse. This is exactly what is happening today. And we have to bear in mind that the world will accordingly look for a bigger responsibility corresponding to the economic sides. So the question is whether or not we are prepared to it. Fourthly, the military and security situation in Asia is complex and a matter of serious concern. Of all the concerns, the nuclear arms issue is a typical one. You can easily find that majority of nuclear-armed states have their presence in this region: Russia, China, US, India, and Pakistan. North Korea has just declared to have developed nuclear arms. Despite such complexity, an effective mechanism of confidence building and conflict easing does not exist in our region, while Europe has nurtured such mechanism over several decades. The Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, CSCE, started at the height of the Cold War to serve as an important multilateral forum for dialogue and negotiation between the West and the Soviet bloc. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, the conference was renamed the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, and its mandate now covers from the inherited challenges of the past to new security challenges such as climate change and terrorism. The other case is the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe, CFE, which limits a level of conventional arms of the two blocs, NATO and Warsaw Pact, and permits inspection without an advance notice. The inspection especially helps fostering transparency on arms and arsenals of other countries and creating confidence among members. In comparison to Europe, Asian security situation lies in the jungle of struggle of all against all. And the stability depends on the balance of power. We should realize that we live on such fragile balance of power, and wisdom of fostering confidence and preventing conflicts is truly needed to guarantee stability and security of our region. Now, let me touch on two areas that I think need to be addressed further in order to move toward building East Asian community as discussed at East Asian Summit. The first area is the perception of the people in the region on some key questions, such as whether or not they feel like belonging to the same community to be established, or whether or not they are prepared to relinquish sovereign rights of a state for the community, or whether or not they share the objective of the community. ASEAN members have for decades nurtured an identity of ASEAN. Then how about the expanded geographical identity of ASEAN plus 3, which includes China, South Korea, and Japan? Or how about ASEAN plus 3, India, Australia, and New Zealand, the East Asian Summit countries? Asia Barometer, a regional survey network operated by scholars from our region, explains that in China, those who identify themselves as Asians are just 5%. This indicates that Chinese people perceive the region as China and others. In case of Japanese, the ratio is 25%, a bit more flexible, but the majority of Japanese still distinguish Japan from others. ASEAN, having a long-time experience of community building and always trying to demonstrate its identity, finds it comfortable to sit in a driving seat to take any initiative on the regional matters. And actually, ASEAN has played a pivotal role in facilitating a dialogue and negotiation. However, China and Japan together occupy 80% of the region's economy and could shoulder major responsibilities for regional and global matters. Just to raise some examples, Japan's official development assistance, ODA, has been focused on ASEAN for several decades, and assistance, coupled with private investment in later days, has greatly contributed to the regional development as a whole. After the crisis of 1997, Japan initiated Chiang Scheme and Asian bond market to enhance financial cooperation. China announced the China-ASEAN Investment Fund at the Boao Forum last April. All of these manifest the two countries' readiness and interest in promoting region-wide cooperation. It's obvious that the regional integration will not be possible without close strategic partnership of China and Japan. Such partnership will not only serve merits of the two countries, but will also open up a way to accelerating and leading the regional integration. However, I have to note that the two giants so far stand far from being united and lack in trust and confidence, which needs to be addressed with utmost effort. The second area is our region's characteristics. There are no other regions like East Asia where you can find any kind of political system, religion, and culture that exists on this earth. The stage of economic development differs from one country to another. Such diversity of political system, religion, and culture, and big gap of development form the basic structure of our region. In this regard, European countries have traditionally shared the same religion, and more importantly, EU integration itself aims to legally enforce member countries to be converged into the same political, social, and economic system based on democracy, respect of human rights, and market economy. Well, in other words, by forming the community, EU members share the same value and share the sovereign rights that once belongs to each sovereign state. Looking at Asian diversity, many observers hold an opinion that integration like EU only applies to Europe. Such observation seems very convincing. However, I emphasize that we should pay due attention to what is already achieved, what is going to happen, as well as the fact that among researchers and government officials, the regional integration is not just a research agenda, but has become a practical policy option. I envisage that future integration of our region will be the one reflecting region's rich diversity and developing into a group or community of multi-layered functions, if not a solid institution like EU. We should not forget all the merits that we may obtain through establishing a common community where members will accelerate economic activities and will be able to manage sound security environment. I think it's our choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kitamura, for your most inspiring lecture. Mr. Kitamura has kindly agreed to take a few questions from the audience. Now, may I invite Professor Lawrence Lau to conduct the question and answer session, please.
Let us give Ambassador Kitamura another big hand. The ground rules is just raise your hand, identify yourself, and please only ask one question. Okay. Questions from the floor. Yes. Gentleman at the back.
My name is Andy, and I'm a Year 1 university undergraduate student. You just talked about the cooperation within the East Asian region and the European region. But we know that in the current situation, there are other economies and strategically important countries like Brazil and Russia. So what are your opinions on the possibility of a global scale cooperation and a possible elimination of cultural barriers between regions like Europe, Asia, and like Latin America, etc.? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. And it's quite a grand vision of a question, and I feel a bit embarrassed to respond to. So one thing I need to say is the global political structure is changing. And for instance, that there was and still is a G7 or G8 and a summit meeting that dominated the decision making in the past. But this has moved to, or the moving to G20 and wider and group of decision-making, or the presenting ideas for the future. So this shows that the world structure is changing, and as you have mentioned, there are many other countries. And although the countries you have mentioned are already members of G20. So the question is that the first, expanding such a member of the forum is okay, but the question is that bearing the responsibility as well as and speaking out and the voices, so that it is still uncertain that whether the expanded G20 and the members are ready to speak out. Okay, they are going to speak out, but the question is that whether they are ready to bear responsibilities and corresponding to the voices they may have. So this is a bit still a question mark. But the expanding into, if we try to expand and even the bigger one from G20, then we need to ask what is the United Nations. So that we have the United Nations and a forum of the world. At the same time, we have separate the decision-making the process. So I think the whole process is now ongoing, and starting from G7 or G8 and expanding into G20, we need to see how this process will proceed. And I do wish that the very effective decision-making will go on, and to be followed by the responsibilities and those members should bear and accordingly. Then as you have mentioned, the cultural barriers or some other areas not easy to put in such a process. And the UN once had a forum of it's a forum to discuss cultural barriers or to overcome such barriers. But it was convened the one time, and I think will be convened again. But so far, it's just a forum for discussion. So I see the future process is that the two wills. One is very comprehensive, the forum like United Nations or some other and the international organization. And the second is that more the smaller size of members, like for environmental protection, and now work in 15 or 16 countries, and for the global economic issue, G20 is now working on. So the important is that each forum should have a tangible outcome of the discussion. Then we'll see the restructuring and afterward. And I'm not sure whether I have responded to a question, but your question covers so big an area, and I may not be able to answer to all. Thank you.
Question back there, the lady sitting at the back row.
Good afternoon, Ambassador Kitamura. My name is Leanna Wong. I am a full-time MBA student here at Chinese U. And so I have a question to follow up Andy's question, actually. So you've mentioned, and I think it's very apparent, actually, to the world right now that Southeast Asia, and Asia in general, has a much higher kind of cultural density, cultural diversity, as compared to, say, Europe or the US. And current modern education trends are beginning to change such that we begin to recognize the different cultural change, the different cultures, so that we get a better understanding and appreciation for each individual culture as it is. Do you think that this type of change of focus, as opposed to saying, Japanese as opposed to saying, putting the emphasis on Japanese education or say Chinese education, but to instead to recognize a country's heritage as opposed to a country's sources of nationalistic pride, is that enough, do you think, to go and start changing the mindset for the future generations to accept the idea of a global economy? Thank you.
Well, thank you again for the question. And first, starting from EU experience, as I see, and I do not think that Europe will become the United States of Europe. And but EU is the expanding and deepening. Then the future shape, I think, will be somewhere between the United States of Europe and a group of sovereign countries, and it's somewhere between. Then the EU, I have mentioned the EU regulations, and the 80,000 pages of big volume of EU regulations based on certain ideas that democracy or human rights and the common values, so-called. But this is one thing, and as I see, and the sovereign states will not disappear in Europe. So it's a kind of the coexistence of sovereign states and EU. Then the preserving the cultural difference. And I know they are quite different in Europe as well. There are different cultures and traditions and histories and so on. So that I do not think that deepening of the integration, the conflicts with the preserving rich cultural diversity. And in my presentation, I use rich diversity. And in the future, the integration here, if that goes on, and we need the kind of good framework for the common merits. But at the same time, and the cultural diversity can be the strength and not just a weakness. So the keeping some standard for the joint action and let's say environment protection or and the food safety, we need a certain criteria to reach a target. But at the same time, this process will not, destroy the keeping rich diversity. So if I put it this way, I mean just and maybe an idea, but the importance is the making integration for its own merit. At the same time, keeping the cultural diversity. I think this could stand in the two ways, and they are not conflicting. And I think that's my response to your question.
Okay, there's a gentleman in the middle. Yeah, identify yourself.
Good evening, Mr. Ambassador. First of all, thank you for coming and giving this impressive lecture. My question is about a possible future Asian security arrangement. The EU was formed, right? But NATO was behind it, and the US and the United States was in it. The security treaty signed there was more likely the multilateral form. But in Asia, they have different kind of bilateral security treaties, like United States with Japan, United States with South Korea. So what would be the future of the Asian kind of security arrangement if Japan is still the only strategic security partner with Japan is the United States. The Democratic Party in Japan I read from some kind of newspapers mentioning like moving away from the United States and re-entering Asia once again. So what would be the kind of future when NATO was, the possible threat was the Soviet and now the Russian, but the target of containment maybe was becoming China and India. So what would be the possible security arrangement?
Okay, good question. In case of Europe, the situation will be different from the Asia, as you have mentioned, that there were clearly two blocks, and U.S. was with the West European side, so that the case is quite different. But the case applies to an idea that there should be something covering all region, like I have introduced OSCE experience, or the Convention of Conventional Arms. And this is a wisdom of securing regional security and helps something to help confidence building and conflict easing. But even such thing we do not have in this region. So this is the starting point of my presentation. The second is that you have mentioned that bilateral alliances, Japan, US, Japan, the US and Korea. And this is basically for the defense of the two countries. But I try to see such a treaty from a bit different perspective, which is the balancer to the regional stability. You see that here in Asia, we have Russia, China, and the alliance with the US and some other countries. But so far, the balance of power is stabilized to some extent, more or less stabilized, so that this is the balance of power. Then having the Japan-US say alliance is the treaty for the say US and Japan, but at the same time contributes to the stability of this region in a sense of overall balance of power. So the treaty can be reviewed from a bit on a wider perspective, and we need a dialogue for the future in any case on security and the issues, and having the U.S., China, and Russia, and those are the first major countries in this region. And such a dialogue will help and the good perspective for the future. Although we haven't started yet, so I can't say any concrete a process for the future. But I think everybody has now recognized the need of such a dialogue, and a dialogue will proceed and will be followed by some a mechanism or arrangement of first the enhancing confidence building. The second, a kind of the mechanism to ease and prevent conflicts. So that we need to see from a bigger perspective. Yes, we have the Japan has alliance with US and so on. This is the existence, and there are some other existence as well. But we need to see the situation as they are and start the dialogue for the future security. This is my perspective for the future. Thank you.
Okay. Gentleman over there.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. A very fruitful lecture. And I'm Tim from the Government and Public Administration Department. And I have actually a very concise question for you. Actually, we know that Mr. Yukio Hatoyama is now the new Prime Minister of Japan. So would the Japanese government have a new strategy or policy in its East Asian regional perspective policy, whatever? Yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Well, his party, Democratic Party, announced their manifesto during the election. And with regard to Asia, and it says that in a general term, placing a priority on Asia. Second, and the party it proposes East Asian community. So those are the stuff, and we have seen from that party. Then say everything cannot be done overnight, and making an East Asian community, and that was my main point in my presentation. And there are many factors to be addressed, and we have to say go one by one, so that we can get some bigger the outcome and from such a process. But I think personally that the Democratic Party this time has a good basis for the future and behavior and future action, formally and proposing that East Asian community. And this is something on which we can work on. This is just a general response to your question.
Please.
Kitamura Taishi, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. My name is Timo Rajakangas. I'm the Consul General of Finland here in Hong Kong. And I found it very interesting to listen to your description of European integration process. In Europe, we tend to be occupied with the current challenges that the European integration process is facing and be worried about not moving forward and forgetting what has been achieved, actually. And I think it was very good to hear from an outsider the fact that I think nobody can deny that it has been a tremendous peace project beyond comparison in the world. And having served in Japan before and now serving in Hong Kong, China, I personally would be very happy to see progress in East Asian integration. I'm sure it would benefit not only this part of the world, but the world as a whole. Now, you listed some of the challenges that East Asian integration process may be facing. I think one of the prerequisites for the European integration process to proceed to the level that it has done is that in Europe, no, I'm not sure how to translate this word into English. Please, German speakers, help me. Vergangenheitsbewältigung. Maybe Gerhard can.
Coming to terms with the past.
Yeah, dealing with the history, dealing with the past. This process, I think, in Europe has, well, not been completed, but at least a fair amount of work has been done in dealing with the, shall we say, wounds of the past. I think it is also fair to say that to the same extent this process has not taken place in Asia. And I think I personally see it's very difficult to take the decisive steps forward until this part of the process has been dealt with. I don't know if you share with this view of mine. I would also like to ask you, do you see, you were just talking about the possible new approach of Hato Yamashita.
Hey.
Do you think he will be taking steps in this direction to deal with the wounds of the past, to enable not only Japan but the whole region to move forward towards a more positive direction? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. And the first, say, national level reconciliation, I would say, that like the France and Germany and experienced and over the decades. And I also mentioned this area in my presentation, although a bit shortly. And the Democratic Party this time, and a new administration, and as a party manifesto, I mentioned that although in a general nature, has the preference on putting a priority on Asia. This is one indication. And the second, Mr. Hatoyama, before he was elected the prime minister, and mentioned in the press conference that he will not visit Yasukuni Shrine. This is one the indication and a message to China, and indicating that he tries to tackle this area and positively. And it's reported, and although officially I don't know, but it's reported that he is planning to visit China in October. And he's this month visiting U.S. for United Nations and also G20 meeting and to see the U.S. President. And what is going to happen, in my personal judgment and the impression, is that the new administration will try to have good ties with U.S. and with China. Why not? Then how far this could go, and especially coming to your the comment on the reconciliation, so-called, and I've been in the business, the Japan and China for many years. And what will happen in my impression is that the new administration will try to have good ties, of course, with China, and he has partially sent out a message already. And if he visits China, and it will be a nice occasion to exchange good messages from both sides. So this is one. But as I mentioned, that reconciliation, this matter, and is not just the business of government, and government has little to do. And the more important is that at the national level, and the mutual understanding, and confidence building, and trust making, and so on. So this is not just a job of some small number of people. It's a joint work of all the people of two sides. Then I know that there has been an effort toward this area, but of course not enough. But what I envisage for the future is that we can expect it's a bigger number of exchanges between people. And we're going to have the bigger number of tourists visiting in Japan, and this does help people to know about Japan, Chinese people to know Japan, and the same way, and for Japanese people to visit China. And this is just one in the example, but I think in the future we have a bigger communication so that the people have a better chance to know each other. And the government has a program, two governments as well, to exchange and youth to visit each other. And so there are some policy-oriented measures, and also at the same time natural movement of the people and the tourism or for some other purposes. And it may take a time, but I think we need to mobilize and the people toward that and the direction, and government can do some to that extent. And the third is when I do propose the East Asian Community building, and this is for of course first for the region, but the case of reconciliation between Japan and China, and the working together in the framework, in the regional framework or multilateral framework, is the good process of working together. And this creates a good confidence building and so on. So that the East Asian community building is not just for the community building, but also between Japan and China, and they can give us a good and a chance of working together for something better, and for the region, and also for the two countries. So that we need a variety of programs, bilateral and multilateral, so that we could proceed in a better way for better consideration and better understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one last question. Anybody? Okay. Yeah, gentleman, second row.
My name is KSR. I'm an alumni of the university. I think my question to ask you is that, for the past 10 years, the Japanese government has been changed for many, many times. In fact, I can always remember the old prime minister's name from Kakuyu Tanaka, Mr. Sato, okay? But for the past 5 years, I can not remember the prime minister because they've been changed within 5 months or 1 year. So what is the national policy of Japan towards, what we are talking about, the integration in, Asia? Because the change of the leadership in the government, is there any impacts on the, foreign policy of the government towards, the theme of today you're talking about?
Yes, and the political leadership is the most important one in such community building. Then under the former ruling party, the party did not have the former policy of the East Asian community. Although the government proposed that, but it was not very much, at least formally endorsed by the party. But this time, the party has proposed the East Asian community. So this is one thing I found new in the new administration. And the leadership, and how long does it last? This nobody can tell. And the new prime minister has just announced that now the time to change the history. So, okay, let's work together. But the last election itself was, of course, the choice of the people, and a choice for a change just happened in the United States. Now the time to change, and the change itself is welcome in Japan. Or the government is now forced to do something different. So what is the difference? What is the continuity? And what is a new creation? And it's now really a melting pot of many different ingredients. So what the new administration, in my impression, and the first job is to make the draft budget, because the draft budget and the existing one was made under the former administration. So now the new administration has to work on that, reshuffling the whole package of the budget. And they have to make it within 3-4 months until the end of the month. So there's not much time left, and people expect something new. And then there will be two areas. First is domestic one, and the budget making. And the second is that foreign policy, and US and China. And starting from this area, and gives the good the basis for the future. But I don't think that the new government can work to show us something about the community building, and it may take some more time. But I think it is good to have the good environment. We need good ties with US, of course, and also the good ties with China. And having such a broader framework of the Japanese policy, and that makes a good basis for us to work on the East Asian community. And I'm quite positive on that. And as I have mentioned already, the good and the good work for Japan and for the region, and also this helps in the good ties with China and hopefully with the United States as well. So let's hope for that. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Ambassador Kitamura, for a most stimulating talk and all the great answers you've given us. And we're looking forward to your return soon, if not before next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kitamura and Professor Rao. Gentlemen, please stay. It is indeed our great honor to have invited Mr. Kitamura to the Chinese University. To show our appreciation, Professor Rao will now present a souvenir to Mr. Kitamura. Gentlemen, please. It is a painting of the campus of the Chinese University by internationally acclaimed artist, director of the Art Academy in Beijing, Wang Mingming, during his stay at the university as an artist in residence. We hope that Mr. Kitamura will remember us and come to visit us again in the future. Thank you, gentlemen.